Hey again. If you're watching this video, hopefully that means you've completed the interactive review exercise and the writing assignment, and you've turned that writing assignment in. In this video, I'm going to review some of the things you should have done as you rewrote that poor story. Now, there's no way for me to cover everything. There's a lot wrong with that story, but I'm going to focus on 3 different styles of changes. I'm going to give an example of each. Each of those changes is intended to align that bad story with our media writing values. As a reminder, media writing has an active voice. It values clarity over creativity. It uses as few words as possible, and it follows AP style guidelines. Now, there are a few things I'm not going to cover in this video. One is the various AP style errors in this piece. There are just so many, and as I mentioned in the introduction video, I don't feel there's much value in going over them one by one. Hopefully you recognize a number of them, and as the semester goes on, you'll learn to recognize more. I'm also not going to talk about the order of the information in that piece. So to make it a good story, you definitely need to rearrange some of the facts. If you have questions about how you chose to order your facts, I encourage you to email the lead TA for the course, and they should be able to answer them. With that, let's start. First, you should have noticed a whole lot of passive phrasing in this piece. Now, I'm not going to talk about every example of passive phrasing here because there are many, but I've pulled out 2, I think, pretty egregious examples that hopefully you noticed and corrected. First, September is when the committee's first meeting will take place. There's also an apostrophe error and an AP style error there, but we won't get into those details. What you want to notice here is that the first meeting, which is the actor in that phrase, is the object of that sentence. That's passive. That's why that sentence feels awkward and removed. Someone who is apprehensive about how businesses would store and share the information collected by the scanners was City Council member Arya Spark. It takes us a long time to get to Council member Arya Spark, but that person is the actor there, and that person should be the subject of that sentence. Let's look at these 2 corrected, and I think you'll agree that they're a lot more clear, they're a lot more powerful. The committee's first meeting will take place in September. Simple, straightforward, that's the way that should read. City Council member Arya Spark expressed worry that businesses might store and share information collected by the scanners. Again, much more straightforward, and it's just much easier to absorb the information when it's presented in that active style. Again, lots of different examples within this piece of passive phrasing, and if you changed other ones, give yourself a pat on the back, because that's a really important part of improving bad writing. Secondly, you probably noticed a lot of overwriting in this piece. And not necessarily the florid, creative style of overwriting that we talked about in the introduction. This is just plain old-fashioned wordiness. I think the most egregious example is this one. The council voted to allow a special committee, which will consist of experts in such areas as law and business and technology and civil rights, to develop a set of recommendations for how dropper and other bar owners could use ID scanner technology to prevent trouble while also balancing privacy concerns. If you got lost in that sentence, I'm right there with you. There's way too much there. This reads like it came out of a contract, or maybe right out of the city council minutes. Government entities often communicate this way. It's a way to get a ton of information down on the page, but that's not your job. Your job is to communicate the most important information in the clearest way possible. So let's take a look at that passage once we apply that filter to it. The council voted to allow a special committee of independent experts to develop a set of recommendations for the proper use of ID scanners. This process will balance bar owners' desire to prevent trouble with privacy concerns. It's still kind of dry, but sometimes with the city council, that's just how it is. And we have removed a lot of information from that passage. But the core news there, that there's going to be this committee, and that this committee is going to try and weigh the concerns of bar owners and privacy advocates to come up with some set of recommendations about this new technology, that's all there. And it's much easier for the reader to grasp. You should have noticed a number of opportunities within this piece to pare down the word count just by being more clear. Next, we're going to talk about a way to do that by eliminating whole sections of this story entirely. There are a lot of opportunities in this piece to cut the word count just by taking information out. And there pretty much always will be. Hopefully, when you're writing after you've done your reporting, you'll always have more information than you need. And usually, you'll get a lot of that information down on the page, and then once you have your story finished, you'll realize pieces of it maybe don't have a place there anymore. Here's some examples of information in this piece that doesn't belong. The technology was developed at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology by doctoral student Olivia Hope. Hope said she got the idea for ID scanning when she spent an entire afternoon trying to get her driver's license renewed and had time to look around at all the government-owned equipment. That's an interesting story, and it has a good place in a completely different publication, maybe something that's about the invention and sale of this new ID scanner, but our story is about a controversy in Madison, Wisconsin. And none of this information is relevant to that controversy. I'd cut the whole thing out. You might have left in a little bit about how it was invented by a doctoral student just for texture, and that's fine, but I don't think any of it needs to be in the story. These next two examples are a little bit more complicated because both of them contain some essential information and some inessential information. A computer database then shares that newly collected information with other area bars using a revolutionary system called IB 782-637-2420. So that there's a computer database that shares this information and that other bars have access to it, that's super important. That's central to the controversy that this story is about. That it has this string of letters and numbers for a name doesn't add anything at all to our story, definitely needs to get cut. Malark has served in his role as police chief for a decade. He is one of the most decorated officers in Wisconsin and has long been pushing the city to enact measures that would increase safety. So that Malark has been around for a while and that he's often an advocate for safety, that's important. We're talking about a controversy here and he's a character in that controversy, so his stance matters. That he's one of the most decorated officers in Wisconsin, that's the sort of puffery you need to be careful with because you'll get it a lot. You'll get it when you're reporting on elected officials or business leaders or pretty much anyone else who has a communication officer on staff. And it'll clutter up your writing and it'll cloud your objectivity to readers. So when you get information like that, be careful with it. Consider, does this belong in the story? Is this relevant to the actual topic, or is this just something that makes this person look good in print? And if it's the latter, cut it. There are a lot of other examples, but hopefully you get the point here. Just by presenting the most important information in the clearest possible way, you should find it's pretty easy to meet even the strictest word counts. I hope that this module has given you something you'll be able to use in the lab. If you have any questions about this exercise or about anything that I've mentioned, I encourage you to email the lead TA. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.